Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember the distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. Welcome back to the Life on Books podcast. My name is Andy, a.k.a. the Metafictional Meathead. Today, I am joining Tony to talk about the Netflix adaptation of 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Hello, Tony.
I'm going to have to drop in at some point in this episode the clip of you reading it before the now infamous clip. If you aren't aware of what's happening, was it the episode we did our favorite quotes?
Favorite opening lines.
Our favorite opening lines of books. And Andy read the opening line from 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And
I butchered it.
I
misspoke. I butchered. I said Buendia or something like that.
Buendia, I think.
Buendia. Yeah. I butchered Buendia, and it blew up. And the internet made fun of me ruthlessly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of comments. We probably still get some now.
Yeah, they trickle in every once in a while.
Of people like correcting me, which I think is hilarious. But I've said this before. No matter how many people in that comment section, correct me and make fun of my mispronunciation, within that comment section, we got a heart eyes emoji from Sharon Stone.
Yes.
So all of the haters can suck it.
Yep.
Because Sharon Stone thinks I'm handsome. So suck it, nerds.
Yeah. What's funny about that is obviously when a video is going viral and there's just comments just flooding in, you don't really see all of them. Or even if you see what people say, you don't necessarily look at who is saying it.
Right.
And you had mentioned like something about Sharon Stone. I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, my mom told me.
And it was days after. And I went back and I was like, oh shit, Sharon Stone.
Yeah.
Sick. But yeah, that was funny because, I mean, a lot of times I misspeak and I'll be recording something for like an Instagram reel.
Yeah.
And it's not even till the next day or a week later when I'm editing and I go, what I said there didn't even make sense. I flip-flop two words or I mispronounce something. So it's just kind of funny. Like not a lot of us read aloud that frequently, I don't think, as adults. So pretty not really a big deal to misspeak when you're reading aloud, especially on a podcast. And I didn't even clock it. Like when you said it, I knew that wasn't correct, but I, again, just was like, oh, he just misspoke. So there's no point in being like, let's pause the show.
Right.
But yeah, so today we're talking about the show, 100 Years of Solitude, specifically the television adaptation. And I would say that there's a lot of books that people say this would make a great movie. And there's a lot of books that people say that could never be adapted to the screen.
Yeah.
And this is one of those books that people say this would never work. And I'm just going to throw this out there now. I think that this is possibly the best adaptation of a book I've ever seen.
I would agree. It's certainly up there. There's a lot of, plenty of adaptations that I haven't seen yet, but after watching it, and we'll get into it more because I don't think there's clearly going to be a second season. Like,
yes.
They didn't cover the whole book.
Yep.
But after watching this show, and this is easy for me to say as some, idiot on the couch, but I think more adaptations would be better served as like a limited series or mini series versus a movie.
Correct.
I mean, obviously it depends on the length of the book.
Yep.
But, if it's like a 200 or 300 page book, like you can condense that into a movie, but something that's the length and complexity of 100 Years of Solitude, I think works so much better as a mini series.
Yeah.
Because there's so much more time to, flesh things out as opposed to like a 2.5-ish hour movie. Like they got 8 hours out of half the book.
Right.
Like,
yeah. But now that we've teased you with the main topic, we're gonna
segue.
We're gonna segue into everyone's favorite part of the show, the reading update. So, what have you been reading this past week, Andrew?
Mine will be pretty quick. Pretty much the same as last week. 2666 by Bolaño. A little bit of The Count of Monte Cristo by Dumas, and then I started Carpinteria, whatever by Alexis Wright.
It is Carpentaria. I double
Carpentaria.
checked.
Okay.
That's how she pronounces it.
Okay. Yeah. Have not gotten much reading done as I'd like this week or in general lately. So pretty boring. Not a lot of updates. So
How are you finding 2666?
I'm still enjoying it. I
How far into it are you?
little over halfway.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Kurt, who's our generous fan, that our viewer that timestamps.
Work those into the timestamp curve every time I burp.
We're gonna do a burp count now. Tom's, please sponsor us.
Yeah. I gotta stop drinking these carbonated monsters. That's not helping the cause.
Yeah.
I'm a little over halfway. I was kind of developing a rhythm with it. And then, I talked about this last week. I kind of put everything on the back burner to finish Invisible Man.
Yep.
And I haven't gotten back into that rhythm of, consistently reading 2666.
Yeah.
So I picked it up last night for a little bit, and I didn't get a ton in.
Yeah.
I had stuff to do, but I was just kind of like trying to remember, like, okay, who's this person again? What's exactly been happening? So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll spend some more time with it today and this upcoming week.
I finally finished Something Happened by Joseph Heller. Did not love it. Sad to say.
Bummer.
Yeah, the first 50 to maybe 100 pages I thought were brilliant.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is going to be better than Catch 22. And then it just got so monotonous, so unnecessarily mundane. I think that what Heller was going for was to kind of really put you inside the mind of Bob Slocum, this kind of deranged, maybe insane person that's been created by middle-class America. Very similar to The Tunnel.
Yep.
By William Gass, but in that way, just kind of like getting in the psyche of this not right in the head person. But it just got so boring. Like, the first chapters, maybe 8-10 pages, and then they pretty much go to like 100+ pages from there.
Oof.
And there's like this one chapter called My Son or My Little Boy is Having a Hard Time. And it's just like pages and pages of him having these completely juvenile conversations with his kid. Like, his kid's, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old or whatever. And they're mad at him because he's giving, like, they'll give him a nickel to go buy like candy with. And then he'll like give it to one of his friends. And they're like, that's not what, you can't be giving people money for nothing type of thing. And then he's like, Daddy, are you mad at me? And he's like, no, why? And he's like, well, you seem mad. Well, I'm not mad. Well, are you mad? No, I'm not. Are you going to hit me? No, I'm not going to hit you. Why would I hit you? I don't know. I think that you might hit me. And it's just like that back and forth for like 4 pages. And I'm like, what am I reading? Like, I don't know. It just was not for me. So the ending had kind of an interesting payoff, I guess, but like wasn't necessarily worth the 580 pages that preceded
Wasn't
it.
worth the squeeze.
Yeah, so
That's always tough.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I went online and looked, and like a lot of people are just like, this is one of the best books ever written. Heller's a genius. I'm like, man, as someone that loves Catch 22, I just did not get this one. So
I wonder how your experience would change if you hadn't read it like fresh off the tunnel. Because I know that was a struggle or something that affected you.
Yeah, definitely a part of it was like not in the right mindset for it, but I don't know. I don't know if that was the full problem for me. So still chipping away at Warrior Dreams, which I talked about last week, which is a nonfiction about why MAGA is the way they are, I guess, for lack of a better term. I did read Pedro Paramo by Juan Rulfo, which has also been adapted into a Netflix movie. I started watching it, was kind of like,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then I also started the Inspector Barlock Mysteries by Friedrich Dürrenmatt, who was a Swiss author, considered kind of like one of the must-read post-World War II German-speaking authors, because they speak German in Switzerland, which I was 2 days ago years old when I realized.
Yeah.
I actually did you know that?
I just learned it just now.
Yeah. I feel kind of dumb for not knowing it, but like I guess I just assumed that there was a Swiss language, which
Yeah.
I think there maybe kind of is, but it's not like the predominant, like the first language in Switzerland is German.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I guess it kind of makes sense because Switzerland's a very small country, but
Yeah.
this was translated by Joel Agee, and yeah. And this is from the University of Chicago Press. And I picked this up basically because I was like, wow, that's a dope cover.
That looks pretty cool.
But it's very good so far. I'm only maybe, that's like I think that one's 2 short stories.
Okay.
I'm only about maybe a third through the first one, but it's very good. And Karin in our book club, who's German, basically said like, yeah, he's considered like one of the 4 horsemen, if you will, of post-World War II German lit.
Cool.
Yeah.
That sounds dope.
Yeah, to be honest, like I had a really hard time when I was shopping the University of Chicago Press's recent sale because there was a lot of books that just sounded incredible.
Yeah.
And when I was looking, I've been trying to read one book from every like recent like quote unquote haul, pretty much like immediately.
Right.
Because a lot of times what had been happening was, and you know how it is, like you go buy 15 books somewhere and then they all just sit on your shelf for a year or two or whatever. So I've been trying to at least read one
Right
away. And so I picked this one because it was the shortest of the 4. But all 4 of them, I was like, damn, like I want to I could read any of these right now because they all sound great. So, but anywho, let's talk about 100.
You've also been chipping away at.
Yeah, Carpentaria.
How far into it are you?
Not that far. 60 pages.
Oh, okay.
So I'm halfway through week one reading of our breakdown.
I caught up and passed you. How about that?
Oh, damn. Yeah, I'll probably finish out week 1 today. So it's interesting so far. I'm not loving it, but it is what it is. So
yeah, I like it enough to keep going, but I haven't gotten like a excuse me, any like final, like it's hard to say final after 90 pages, but like
yeah.
Any real thoughts yet?
Yeah. So yeah, that's my weekly reading update.
All right.
Let's talk about television.
Let's do it.
On our book podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say, like, it'll be hard to have this conversation without spoilers.
Right.
So if you haven't read the book,
why?
Yeah, go read it. It's an excellent book. But yeah, there are going to be some spoilers here. I don't really want to dance around it too much.
Right.
So I think let's start by talking about why people tend to say that this won't make a good television adaptation. And I think the biggest thing for me is probably that there are so many weird magical realism elements in the book.
Yes.
Like ghosts and people that shapeshift kind of, and
absolutely.
I think that's hard to do.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, we've talked about it before with works of fiction. Like you have to have some suspension of disbelief. And something I noticed while watching the show is I had a much harder time doing that when I read the book. Not like a debilitating amount, but like, you know, watching reading the book, like, I think maybe because it's a little bit more automatic. Like I'm just kind of used to like, okay, this is what the author says is happening. Like, let's just go for the ride. But you know, I remember like in the when Jose Arcadio goes mad and they tie him to the chestnut tree in the yard. like reading the book, I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like he's kind of going crazy. They can't control him anymore. Like he's got to be secured down. And then watching the show, you know, their house is massive.
Yeah.
And he's just in this courtyard tied up to this tree, and they've got all these like awnings and structures erected around him. And I was just like watching, I was like, okay, surely there's got to be a way they can like secure him inside somewhere. It's just like things like that. Like in the book, I was like, okay, sure, whatever you say, Marquez. Like, let's go for the ride. But I was watching the show. I'm like, why?
But I think the reason why, oh boy,
There we go.
hey, it's podcasting time, there, bud. Jeez, Louise. I think what I loved about it was they were so unapologetic about it in the show.
Yeah.
It was just like, yeah, this dude's tied to a tree for 4 episodes.
Yeah.
And they're not making a big deal about it.
Right.
Similar to in the very beginning, when he kills the guy after the cockfight.
Right.
I'm forgetting the character's name.
Prudencio.
Yeah, that's right. And then he just shows up as a ghost, and he's like walking around, and he's got the blood.
Yeah.
And again, it's like it's there, but it's not in your face. And I think the actors do such a good job of like acting as if, yeah, it's just kind of normal,
Right.
that it works for me. For me, like when it comes to suspending, your disbelief, is the rules that have been set up for the world that you're in. A lot of times for me, like I can't turn a blind eye to something if logically, like it doesn't make sense in the context of how a character would behave or the kind of rules of the world that have been laid out. But that's kind of the neat thing about magical realism is, going into it, like we don't really know what the rules of the world are. So anything can kind of go.
Right.
But yeah, I think the magical realism of the story. Hey, we're doing a podcast here. You good? Did you get him?
Great work, bud.
There's the magical realism elements, and I think the other reason why people thought it couldn't be adapted to a show or a movie is that there are so many characters with similar names.
Yeah.
And so,
I actually think works a little bit, or it's a little bit more manageable in the show.
Because you have a face to put to
you
it.
can put faces to the names, and like,
Yeah.
even if I didn't remember, like, okay, is this Jose Arcadio, like the specific derivative of the name, I was like, okay, this is this character. Like this is, he's so-and-so's son or something like that.
Yeah.
So it made it a little bit easier to follow, and I'd kind of have to like jog my memory. Like, okay, yep, that's his name.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And then I also think the third thing that would kind of is a challenge that they did handle well is the story does span such a very long time.
yes.
Period. Multiple generations. So I think that's kind of a tricky thing, particularly anytime like a character ages quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I find it can be very jarring when they swap actors sometimes.
Yes.
That was very true of the newest Game of Thrones spinoff, House of the Dragon, I think it is. The first maybe 3 or 4 episodes, they have these young actors, and then there's a huge time leap, and it just swaps to adult actors.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it didn't really work for me there, but I thought they, again, did a really good job of it with the 100 Years of Solitude show. I felt like the older actors really looked like what these people could look like after 40 years of aging. So I thought that they overcame kind of all of the big challenges adapting this book. What I guess my first big question would be is what did you like most about the show?
Excuse me. I think the just kind of being able to see how they brought Macondo to life, like that was really cool. Because obviously when you're reading, like you have this, especially with a book like 100 Years of Solitude, where it's very descriptive, and you also have those, we're talking about like those elements of magical realism. Like you have to be very imaginative while you're reading, just trying to picture everything, what the setting is like, what the characters look like, how they interact. And I thought it was really cool how they showed, over the passage of time, just starting from this group of people that, founded a village, and it was just kind of some rudimentary huts and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it really expanded into this very prominent, area.
Yeah.
And a developed town.
Yeah.
That was cool to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another thing that they got very correct is the balance between funny and serious tones,
Yes.
which the book definitely has, in my opinion. And the show, I think, represented that well. And that's hard to do sometimes without, like, if you have something that has serious subject matter, when you throw comedy into it, it almost becomes a little like slapstick or just cheesy.
Yeah.
But I feel like they handled the kind of more comedic elements as like undertones to a,
Without it being too farcical.
yeah.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
And that, I think a lot of it is chalked up to the actors, which I thought all the actors were incredible.
They were, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't speak Spanish, but, even reading subtitles, I feel like the tone of the language was really spot on.
Did you watch it in Spanish with English subtitles, or did you?
did.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Did you watch it dubbed?
I watched it dubbed.
Oh, I cannot do dubbed to save my life, because I think the problem for me with dubbed is that it's not their voice.
Yeah.
And so sometimes like it just doesn't fit
Doesn't capture the emotion.
Yeah. I don't know. Wow. You're a dub guy, huh?
It
Brutal.
was in this instance.
Yeah.
I think I got like, in the first episode or whatever, I set it to be English subtitles.
Yep.
And I think it just automatically went with like the dubbed version.
Sure.
And I didn't really make any effort to
To switch it.
switch it back.
Yeah.
So
How
I
was
just rolled with it.
How was the dubbed? So one thing I kind of noticed was that with a lot of adaptations, they try to word for word follow like lines from the book.
Uh-huh.
I didn't get that sense with this so much. Like there were some instances, obviously, but a lot of it seemed like they were just touching on ideas or concepts without like verbatim repeating lines. How was it with the dub though? Did you get that same sense?
More or less,
Yeah.
it's been a while since I've read the book, so I don't remember a ton of stuff verbatim, other than some of the big quotes, which I recognize some of those within the show, but I got the same kind of sense that they were just sticking to. I don't want to say sticking to the script because, but sticking to the themes and concepts and ideas of the book with making it a little bit more natural of a dialogue for a show.
Yeah, I really think that's kind of the big weakness of a lot of adaptations. I felt that way about White Noise, the Don DeLillo book. It's like, especially in the first 15, 20 minutes, which I never really got much beyond that because I thought it was so bad.
Yeah.
But it's like they literally are just scene for scene, line for line, just following the book.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work for me.
No, it felt very clunky. I didn't finish the movie either. I got a little further than you did, but yeah, it felt very clunky watching that movie. And watching this show, it felt like a much more natural, like they used the book as source,
Right.
not
Right.
direct lifting from it.
Yeah, I like you, it's been a while since I've read 100 Years of Solitude, but nothing jumped out at me like, oh, that wasn't in the book, or they really fundamentally changed this character, but at the same time, they aren't just using the text as a script. They're using
Right.
it as a guideline. So the general story is the same. There's no major changes. So for example, like Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, which the book is great and the film are great, but in very different ways. In the movie, the daughter is older and she's kind of like this computer nerd. And the little boy is more of just like a little kid, annoying type of thing. I think in the book, those are like swapped, if I remember correctly. And then famously, like Game of Thrones, the show, and I have not read the book, so this is secondhand information, but in the show, there are some characters, like two characters that have been kind of combined just for brevity's sake, because Game of Thrones is like a huge world building thing.
Right.
But, yeah, I don't get that sense with 100 Years of Solitude. It seems like they're very true to the cast, but again, they're not lifting line for line. And it makes sense that like just using the text as a script doesn't work, because one of the things you learn in grade school when you're learning how to write is that spoken word and written word are very different mediums.
Absolutely.
And they shouldn't be done the same way.
Yeah. Like I said, it's been a while since I've read the book. So if there were small things that were changed, I didn't catch them.
Yeah.
Even if the characters weren't like 100% faithful to the characters in the book, like there weren't any situations I don't think where like two characters were merged for, like you said, brevity's sake or anything like that. But even if there were small changes made, like it all felt very natural. None of it was like, the hell did they do that guy? Like it,
Yeah.
there were some characters that I didn't like were slightly different than like what I visualized when I was reading the book.
Yeah.
But nothing, again, they didn't turn someone that was like weak and effeminate into this big, burly, super strong character. Like there wasn't any drastic changes like that.
Yeah.
It might have been some, slight changes to mannerisms, but
Yeah. I think one of the things that kind of surprised me was like Arcadio was kind of depicted as having like a woman's buttocks.
yes.
And I was like, I don't know if I remember that from the
Right,
book. But
right.
okay.
All right. Why not? Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, one thing I loved about the show was that I thought all of the actors, and this is in particular with how their wardrobe and makeup was, I thought all the actors were like very unique looking.
Yeah.
They were very memorable, well defined visually.
Yes.
Nothing really comes to mind off the top of my head, but a lot of times I watch something and I'm like, I can't necessarily right away like distinguish between two people because they look too similar. It's like, yeah, just two generic white dudes, like,
Right.
But I thought everyone in the show was very distinct looking in kind of a unique way, particularly Malkiades.
Yeah.
With just the big white beard and the mustache and the hat and everything.
Yeah.
I was like, if I can look like that when I get older, like
Absolutely.
I'm all in.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, another thing I really loved about it, and this is more of my kind of film production nerd side, is I thought that the camera movement in particular was used to great effect in the storytelling. So again, like one of those challenging things in an adaptation like this is like the time spans. And so I don't know if you caught it, but there's a few scenes where the camera will be tracking a person as they're walking, and then they'll like step off camera left and the camera will turn to the right, and it's the same, like they're still inside the house,
Right.
Or in the courtyard, but then
Time has passed.
and
Yeah.
it shifts back to the left and it's like 20 years later or whatever.
Right.
So I thought that was a very creative way for them to handle some of this magical realism time change elements.
I thought they handled the passage of time very well. It never felt like clunky. I probably didn't notice the specifics of it because I don't have the, film background. But there weren't any like awkward, like 20 years later.
Right.
It just kind of naturally flowed and you were like, okay, time has passed.
Yeah, a big thing.
And it all felt very smooth.
very, very smooth. That's the thing, is like if you didn't necessarily like notice the device they were using to do that, that's actually a good thing.
Right.
Like
I think, right. You know, I talked about this earlier. You made reference to the White Noise movie. On top of not thinking it was a very faithful adaptation of the book, I just didn't think it was a very well made movie.
Yeah.
And watching this show, I do think it was as faithful as it could be to the book. You know, obviously there were some creative changes, which again, I thought they were well done, but I thought it was just a really well made show. Period.
Yeah. I agree. The set design was incredible. The casting I thought was amazing. The wardrobe was amazing.
Yep.
The cinematography, as far as like I already mentioned, the camera movement choices, the color grading, just was fantastic. The lighting was fantastic. It looked like they used what are called anamorphic lenses. So in traditional, like the lenses we're filming with here are just kind of your normal, what they call spherical lenses. Anamorphics, I'm not exactly sure how the design works exactly, but they have a different type of like glass element in them where when the raw footage looks very distorted, almost like a fisheye kind of. And then you de-squeeze it in the editor to make it the ratios look normal again. But what it allows you to do is kind of maintain like the elements of like what a 35 millimeter lens would look like, for example, but actually get a much wider field of view. And it creates this very interesting like separation between whoever you're, like if you're filming an actor, separation between the person and the surroundings. It kind of just makes them look like you get a much bigger perspective of both the person and the environment that they're in. And it looked like they used anamorphics, which I thought was a great choice for this, because there is so much about the town and the house that are kind of relevant to the story. Also, like little things that they did, like you have this magical realism world where it seems like it's magical realism. It's going to be kind of goofy and over the top. Most of the world seemed very normal, very real.
Yes.
And then there would just be this one little thing that was like clearly like another otherworldly. So the Trail of Blood.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
That goes through the town after Jesus, which one is it? Jose Aureliano, the son.
The son,
gets killed or shoots himself or whatever.
Yeah, however he dies, yeah.
And then the mother, the Trail of Blood goes all the way through the town to her house.
Right.
Little things like that, I just thought, this is perfect. This is the perfect amount of like weird.
Yeah.
It's not over the top.
Absolutely. Yeah, they nailed it without being like too making it too fantastic.
Yeah.
It really had that element of magic to it.
Yeah.
Without being, again, like I just said, over the top, like fantasy type element.
And that's I don't know. I just think that's really hard to do. It was almost a little reminiscent to me of White Lotus. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
That's a show that really balances that kind of, there's no magical realism in that, obviously, but it balances that kind of like serious.
There's some absurdity to it, for sure.
That serious, but like darkly comedic undertones to it.
Yeah.
It was kind of reminiscent of that. Is there anything that you didn't like about the show?
I don't know if anything particular with the show. It might just be like me as a person and my attention span. But it was not something that I found myself like binging.
Yeah.
I'd watch one episode and just be like, okay, I'll pick it up tomorrow.
Yeah.
There were some times where like I'd start an episode and make it 20, 30 minutes in and just be like, okay, I I'm not. It's not clicking right now. Like I'll pick it up later this afternoon. Like I don't know if it's fair to call it like slow moving, but it, there's a lot that happens in the book and, the show. So it takes some time to kind of like develop things.
Yeah.
So there were just some of those moments where like I wasn't able to fully click and pay attention, so to speak. But again, that could have just been me, not necessarily a fault of the show.
I think that what you're doing right now is a great example of what the issue might be, which is that our phones have ruined all of our attention spans.
Yep, that's exactly what happened.
So this is actually a thing. I'm very confident that we've probably mentioned this before, but when things like Netflix shows are written now, they're written with the idea that someone's probably going to be watching them with their phone in their hand and only half paying attention.
Yeah.
So there's a big cry in the kind of film fan film fan sphere of like, why does everything suck now?
Yeah.
And it's because like a lot of people are sitting down to, or I shouldn't say a lot, but some people are sitting down to fully pay attention to a show, and others are texting at the same time.
Ooh. I'm good. No, sorry.
But yeah, that's literally it, right? Like if you have this complex, in-depth story and somebody's only half paying attention, they're not going to get all of it.
Yeah.
So it's really watered down, I think, a lot of the stuff that's being put out. But on the flip side, if your brain is like now just been wired for constant.
I think, that's a big part of it for sure. And I think another element that very heavily relates to that, what you were just saying, is at least personally and lately, like my time to like my dedicated time for engaging with any sort of artistic medium is when I'm reading. And just like based on my own personal tastes, like if I'm throwing on, putting something on the TV and flopping down on the couch, is generally something that like I'm just going to kind of mindlessly watch.
Yeah.
While I fuck around on my phone.
Yeah, you doom scroll, yeah.
Well, it's like, I had a long day. I kind of just want to like disassociate.
Yeah.
I'm going to put on a sitcom that I've seen a handful of times. And even if I haven't seen this episode and forget the specific details of it, it's okay if I get distracted for 3 minutes because I see a funny reel or an interesting Reddit post. Like,
well, I think,
and so it was more of, I had to make more of a concerted effort to like, no, put the phone down, watch the thing for an hour. You'll be okay. And again, that's more of a me thing than a show thing.
Yeah, I think if you had watched it with subtitles, that probably would have changed. Because I actually am very much like you are with television in general right now. I'll put something on in 10, 15 minutes and I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever. I'll just shut it off or I'll be scrolling on my phone at the same time. But I found that with the subtitles, you're reading. So it's a little bit more engaging. You literally can't look away because then you'll miss something.
Right.
I did think that maybe the last 2 or 3 episodes were a little bit slower paced than the first half of the season. But overall, I just absolutely loved it. I finished it maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago now. When we decided to do it this weekend, I was like, do I rewatch it? Like, because I loved it. I mean, I really don't have any complaints or gripes about it, to be honest.
I don't either. I thought it was fantastic. Like I said earlier, like it was faithful to the book, but it was also just a really well-made, good show.
Yeah, yeah.
So, which I think helps a lot. Like even if it's not, particularly faithful to the book, if it's a well-made adaptation, those bits and pieces that were changed aren't as strikingly obvious. And they kind of make sense and it flows a little better and you can see the artistic freedoms that they take, and like it makes sense
Yeah.
in the context of I'm watching it happen versus reading it and kind of filling in the blanks with my own imagination.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think that, well, they must have been working on it for a long time, because I don't know if you remember the video I made about 100 Years of Solitude like 2 years ago.
yeah,
When I had posted that, I saw a very short teaser for the Netflix adaptation, and so they must have put a ton of work into this. I mean, it looked like a pretty big production.
yeah. I do remember hearing about it quite a while ago.
Yeah.
So
Also, I recently read Pedro Paramo by Juan Rufo. That book very famously inspired Gabriel Garcia Marquez. You've read it, right?
yeah,
that's right.
It's been a while, but I've read it.
After reading that book, you can really see the influence that it
Yes.
had.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with the ghosts and all the different
Yes.
people in the town, and that is also a very magical book.
Yeah. And it's a good way though, because I didn't read it and go, oh yeah, like 100 Years of Solitude is like kind of a rip off of this.
Right.
I think tonally they're very different. Thematically they're fairly different. It's just kind of like conceptually,
Yeah.
with really with the magical realism is what I think is the big similarities are.
Yeah, I think, Marquez kind of took some concepts out, or we'll say he was influenced by Pedro Paramo, and like clearly took the things that in that novel that influenced him and made them his own.
Right.
Like it wasn't like an obvious like, and maybe I would feel different because I read 100 Years of Solitude before
Right.
Pedro Paramo, so maybe I would feel differently now, but I know it wasn't anything that like struck out to me as like, oh, like Marquez just totally ripped this off.
Yeah, for sure.
And like you said, tonally they're very different. Like, obviously we're talking about there's a lot of underlying darkness within 100 Years of Solitude, but I think to me, Pedro Paramo felt like a lot more dark and haunting.
Yeah, there's less like comedic elements to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
more ostensibly kind of violent and grim.
Well, I think also in 100 Years of Solitude, the use of like ghosts showing up is more to add some depth to the characters.
Yeah.
You have Prudencio coming back to kind of haunt Jose Arcadio and making him kind of do some reflection on his part, versus where the ghost and Pedro Paramo are kind of like there to add this element of haunting darkness. They're not, I don't want to say they're there for nothing, but like the point of the ghosts is that, oh, there are ghosts.
They're used much more sparingly in 100 Years of
Yes,
Solitude.
yes,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I guess I had to look it up, but you can tell if you've read the book when you get to the end of the first season of 100 Years of Solitude, the show, okay, this isn't the whole story.
Right.
I thought maybe this is like halfway, but I guess it only goes up through chapter 7 of 20, I believe.
Okay.
So I'm curious if it's going to be 2 more seasons or just 1 more and they'll kind of pack it all in.
I was trying to remember while I was watching the show, like how events in the book took place. Like I, kind of had in the back of my mind, like, okay, I'm pretty sure this person dies. Pretty sure this major thing happens in the town.
Right.
Like obviously I think it was maybe last week or the week before or something like that. We kind of made reference to the United Fruit Company and how those events were put in the book or referenced in the book. And I was like kind of trying to remember like that scene. Like when does this happen? Kind of trying to figure out like if they were leaving things out or skipping over stuff or, just kind of taking some artistic license to eliminate some things that were not as consequential as others.
Yeah.
But I think now that you say that, they only got through like 7 chapters, then I think they definitely There's definitely going to be at least another season.
That's what, yeah. So chapter 7 is what I read on Reddit, and I'm just taking that person at their word.
Yeah.
Like I said, I read the book 2 years ago at this point, probably longer for you, right?
Yeah, it's been like 4 for me.
Yeah. It made me want to reread the book.
Absolutely.
It also made me want to learn how to speak Spanish, which I just do not have the bandwidth for right now. But yeah, I don't know. It was, I guess, very pleasantly surprising because I was very skeptical about it being able to be adapted into a show. Or
There's a lot of moving parts. Aside, obviously, it's a dense and complex book, and there's all the elements of magical realism. Like it's hard to, we talked about that. It's hard to adapt those without it seeming too much like a fantasy.
Yeah.
Not that there's a problem with any sort of like fantasy TV show, but that's just not what the book was.
Right.
And there's also a lot of things going on. It's hard to capture all of them within an allotted amount of time, which is, again, at the top of the show, I said that I think more books would be served being adapted in this way as a limited series or a mini series or something like that, where instead of, like, again, you having a 2 to 3 hour window, you have 8 to 10 hours to play with.
Yeah.
And you might still have to, put some things on the cutting room floor, but you don't have to eliminate as much.
I think another thing that the book served really well, like you had mentioned earlier, like it was a little bit easier to keep track of the characters with the similar names because you had faces to put to them. I also think that it really helped to clarify some of the Colombian politics that the book deals with that you don't necessarily get if you are American.
Right, right.
Because ultimately, like, the book is quite a political one, but I think that's not usually what Americans have to say about it. They're like, oh, the writing was beautiful and these characters were so fantastic.
The political struggle is much more upfront in the show than it is in the novel.
And they definitely, like, make it very easy to understand.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was kind of cool. And, political strife, that's like right in my alley. So I enjoyed that bit. Also, like, all the actors and actresses were just like very good looking people too.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, this is like a good looking cast of people. I thought the casting of Rebecca was like so perfect. It looked very near to kind of how I had imagined her in my head. And if I can find it, I'll drop it in to the video of the podcast. But I was looking at her thinking, wow, this person looks so familiar to me. And I remembered what it was. I don't know if it's still there, but there was a music venue in Plastow, New Hampshire called the Word Barn.
Okay.
And I went to...
I think it's still there. It's like I don't know. Carry on.
Yeah. Plastow or Exeter, somewhere down that way. But I went to go photograph a show there years and years ago. It was actually pre-COVID, I think. And they have a giant mural behind the stage.
Yeah.
And it's a mural of a girl, and it looks
just like her,
just like the woman that played Rebecca.
That's cool. It's in Exeter. It's still there.
Oh, cool. Yeah, great place to see a show if you ever get a chance. It's very, to put in perspective how intimate of a show or venue it is. I went to go see Caitlin Canty there, who's kind of like a country artist, country folk, and so mostly acoustic. Thankfully my camera has like what they call a silent shutter, so it doesn't actually use the mechanical shutter. If you put the setting on, it just uses it basically turns the sensor on and off, which has pros and cons to it. But one of the pros is that it doesn't make a clicking noise.
Yeah.
I had to turn it on because it was like so dead quiet.
Wow.
Other than her music.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I was like, I'm disturbing people by taking these pictures. I mean, I was there to like photograph the show. It wasn't like I just brought my camera with me, but yeah, it was. It's a cool place, and they've actually had quite a few artists through there that later like blew up. Like Tyler Childers has played there, who like sells out like arenas now, you know?
Yeah.
And the place probably holds, I don't know, 200 people at most. So it's a cool venue. But
Cool.
yeah, I really loved everything about 100 Years of Solitude. I can't wait for season 2. I hope that it's not these days, man. It's like
I know
7-episode season, 3 years until the next one. It's like, God damn.
it's funny you say that because I know you're a fan of the show Reacher,
Yeah.
which I have not watched any of.
It's so bad. It's so good.
But I saw like a meme or something the other day that like 15 years ago, that would be a show that would be like 20 something episodes.
Absolutely.
And it would be out annually.
Yes.
And now, like, how long is a season?
I think it's 8.
Yeah.
I think it's 8 episodes.
And they're what, every other year at this point?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's got to be tough, right? Like, you spend all this money, all this time to make it this big production, like
Right.
like a Reacher or even 100 Years of Solitude, right? And then people binge it. Some people binge it in a day.
Right.
A day.
Right.
You spent literally tens of millions of dollars and possibly years to make this thing, and people rip through it in 8 hours. Like,
Right.
so that I get it. Like, that's tough. But yeah, I grew up on like Seinfeld and Star Trek Next Generation, which had like 30 episodes per season.
Right.
Law and Order SVU. I mean, there's like hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah, I was
of
going
them.
to say, like, something like that, or like, I used to watch like NCIS with my parents.
Yeah.
And that was, again, like new episodes every week for months.
Yes.
And then the season would end. And then like 3 months later, it'd be like, and on the next season of it, like,
Yeah.
you just like ever just take a break? Just like chill. Like they would take a seasonal break and then they'd be back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Maybe we should bring back network TV.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's tough though. Like the way that Netflix does it, I like the most, where they just here's all the episodes.
Yeah.
If you want to watch them, watch them. Like HBO, they do weekly releases.
Yeah.
And it's very annoying, right? Like White Lotus comes out at 9:00 on Sunday nights. It's like, bro, I'm trying to go to bed.
Right.
Like, you know, Reacher, which is on Prime, they did it. I don't know if the previous seasons were like this, but they released the first 3 episodes all on the same day. And then they've been weekly since then.
I think a lot of shows are starting to do that.
Yeah.
Or they're like releasing it in batches where like every week it'll be 3 or 4 new episodes.
Yeah. Because they're clearly trying to keep people from like, I just want to watch this one show. I'm going to buy 1 month of Netflix, watch all the episodes, and then cancel my subscription. So they try to keep bleeding you out that way.
Which from a capitalistic standpoint kind of sucks. But to go back to what we were talking about earlier with attention spans,
Yeah.
it's probably better for all of our collective attention spans to not just spend 8 hours watching one show.
Right.
And then just be like, what do I do for the next 2 years?
Yeah. Yeah. I did that yesterday with Drive to Survive for Formula One.
Okay.
Leading up to the new Formula One race season, every year they release the show Drive to Survive, which is basically like a recap of the previous season. It's heavily dramatized, but I watched like half the episodes on Friday and half on Saturday.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny, right? Because like the first race of the season is like next weekend, and I was like, damn, why did I watch all these already? I was like, I should have like spaced it out this week, because now I'm like all jazzed up about Formula One, but I have to wait another week to watch a race. Yeah, I don't know. It's things are changing. You know what I mean? Like,
Don't I know it?
it used to be like direct to DVD meant your movie sucked, and now a lot of great movies go straight to streaming.
Yeah.
And I will say though, there was a period of time where John and Gunnar and I were going to the movies almost every week.
Yeah.
And I was just going in blind. I was letting them pick, and I would sometimes not even know the name of the movie we were going to see.
Yeah.
And it was cool, like go in and just like, I get what I get. I mean, I guess technically you can be on your phone if you want to be rude in the theater, but there's kind of like a social pressure not to.
Right.
So it was like really nice to just sit there and pay attention to one thing for 2 hours straight.
Yeah, I'd like to get watching more movies on a
Yeah.
consistent basis.
The theater, honestly, it's a good way to go, and it's crazy because like not a lot of people go to the
Right.
movies anymore. So the theater's usually very quiet, very few people there.
And I live pretty close to that. What is it? The Apple Cinema or whatever
in Hooksett.
right
Yeah,
in Hooksett.
Yeah.
And that's a really nice theater.
it is. And I think on like Tuesdays, I want to say it's Tuesdays, it's like $5.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's the other thing too, right? Like the prices have really come down because they want to get people in the door. So there's definitely something to it. Yeah, I don't know. Take me back, man.
Yeah, right.
I'm feeling some nostalgia for the way things used to be. But anything else you want to say about 100 Years of Solitude, the television
Nothing
series?
else I want to say about the show, but you already touched on it. Like, I really want to reread the book now.
Yeah.
So I think we should definitely do that for a book club some point in the future.
I'm down for that. Have you read anything else by Marquez?
I've read Love in the Time of Cholera.
How was that?
It was okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it was good. Obviously, he's a very talented writer. Like the
Right.
writing was there.
Yeah.
It's been some time as well, but I don't remember being as captivated by the narrative
Yeah.
as I was with 100 Years of Solitude. But it's a very well written book. You know, he's again fantastic writer.
Yeah.
But that's it. I do have a couple of his other books. I think I have one novel and then one of his like collections of novellas.
Cool.
But that's about it. I haven't read enough of him.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll do that.
All right.
In the interim.
Love it. Well, if you enjoy this show, let us know your thoughts down below. If you have any critiques of it, I honestly have no gripes, so I'd be curious what other people thought of it.
And if you have any critiques of us and our show,
Shut the fuck up.
yeah, save it for yourself.
Yeah.
Write it down, put it in a bottle, throw it in the river.
There was, I don't even remember what the comment was that we got on the channel the other day, but I didn't respond to it. I just, whatever. But I wanted to say, have you tried f***ing off? Go f*** off and see if that resolves your issue. Because it's just like, if you don't like it, don't watch it.
If you don't like it, go eat some batteries and shut the fuck up.
Go eat a fireworks sandwich. Yeah, if you want to support this nonsense, you can join our book club. It's only $5 a month. Link for the Patreon is down below. It is the best way to support the podcast, to keep me from having to take on real work as a person, which might happen anyway. Also, just sharing. That's the best way to help the creators that you like. Share their videos with other people. So what are we talking about next week?
I don't know.
All right, we'll figure it out. See you guys next week.